some nuances which were perhaps not pointed out, some other things that we could elucidate. One is, I'd like to talk about this word. For our Indian colleagues, it is not new, but parivar means family. And any successful NGO or social enterprise or social business or a social activism or any of these things is usually done on the concept of a family. Because what you need to realize is, since money is not the driving force here, what bonds everybody together is the concept of the parivar, of the family. It is that sense of mutual respect, mutual recognition, mutual care, fellow feeling that holds the whole thing together. And this is very important because without that glue, no social organization can work. Because as I point out, the driving motivation, whatever the processes may be, the driving motivation is not money making. In any corporation, it is market share and profits. It's all to do with money or the process of realizing more money. Any social organization, on the contrary, that has to be the operational bonding glue, much more than in a corporate organization. You have also seen several others in the past. You talked about Narayan Udayalaya, you talked about, let's say, Arvind Eye Hospital, and all the case studies which we did. You see that the most successful NGOs, most successful social organizations run on a kind of family concept. We can explore that as we go along. Mahila Mandal, of course, means association of women, and that has a very important connotation because, like many parts of the world, in India too, women were marginalized, not given their due credit in society. It's maybe somewhat different, but in rural India, it is still not very different. So, of course, it started out with empowerment of women, and then it emerged into a family. So that's one. So I won't go into this, but what I will say is that it started with a freedom fighter and a very different kind of ethos and a sense of contribution and a sense of activism. So there was social activism along with some kind of fight for freedom, self-denial, self-offering, and that kind of thing. And the gentleman, Datta Purao, was awarded a Padma Shri. That means he was already somebody, if I'm not wrong, it was Datta Purao, I think, the father who was awarded the Padma Shri, wasn't it? The mother, okay. So the mother was awarded the Padma Shri, so there was definitely a kind of recognition of what they did. So this is a kind of legacy of these two people, and in terms of their credibility, that doesn't come from Annapurna. It comes from their activism, their work for freedom, and the Padma Shri award. So it's a different kind of thing. Okay. The third thing I'd like to talk about is microfinance. I don't want to talk about the theory. What I'd ask Ramita, we didn't do we haven't shared a video link with you. And I remember some of you telling me that you hadn't attended the speech of Muhammad Yunus here. Remember in our first classes we talked about the fact that Muhammad Yunus was in IMC a few days before the course started, and I kind of assumed that most of you had attended. How many did? One. One? Only one? Okay. So what I'll do is, so that's my misconception, Ramita remind me, I will share a link of what Muhammad Yunus stands for, because essentially Muhammad Yunus won his entire Nobel Prize for his work in the area of microfinance. And basically part of the story is, that banking is at your doorstep, and for banking, or rather, the money comes to you, or the empowerment comes to you, and you don't need to fill up lengthy forms. it is not complicated and all that kind of thing, and you create more jobs for people, and it's much more than money. So all of that. So to understand that whole gamut, we will share the link of Mohammed Yunus' page. Not here. Here I think you can probably get it through the IIM portal. But what I'll share with you is something he did at LSE, London School of Economics. So that is very comprehensive, and you can actually go through it and familiarize yourself not only with microfinance but the entire philosophy behind it. Because more than a money thing, and more than the fact that you are avoiding the money lender and paying hundreds of percents of interest, it is also a philosophy which needs to be understood and communicated. But what I want to add is, in a few days' time, when is it that Mr. C.S. Ghosh is coming here?
10th.
10th. So today we are on the 1st. Mr. Chandrasekhar Ghosh is a senior Ashoka fellow, and he also is a very successful in microfinance. In fact, part of his early life was in Bangladesh, part of his early life, only part of his education. You will meet him here on the 10th. But what it shows, why I mentioned Mr. Ghosh, is that, sorry?
8th. Yes.
8th of November, so just in a week's time. But what I'm trying to say is, he's taken one more step. So Mohammed Yunus stopped with microfinance. Of course, there's also other things like Grameen phone, that means the mobile phone, and all those things empowered by the Grameen Bank. But Chandrasekhar Ghosh then basically organized a movement which in sense is a further evolution, which means he started as a microfinance organization, then became a non-banking finance corporation, NBFC, which the group talked about, and finally it's got the shape of a scheduled bank. So in that way, what you realize is that when you are borrowing from somebody to lend to somebody, you have a limit to how much, at what rate you can lend. All right? When you become a bank yourself, then your ability to loan at a lesser rate of interest is much higher. So in a sense, it is a further evolutionary step beyond what Mohammed Yunus had already conceived of and done in Bangladesh that has been realized here. And therefore, when you meet him and when you, basically when you hear him out, you realize that a further step has been taken, because the ability of Bandhan Bank to reach out, therefore, is huge. And the vertical integration is starting from the poorest of India's villages, or at least where Bandhan Bank reaches, to the point that they are, catering to some project finance, rich people also. So it covers the entire spectrum and is not restricted only to the bottom, and they are not obliged to borrow necessarily from other commercial banks. You get me? So that's a further thing. So that's just a remark. On rural microfinance in India and what has happened, the self-help groups is a very popular one. I mean, Mr. Haldar was very right. The JLGs are a very small component of the entire story here. Okay? It's mostly SHGs. And however, what I'd like to add is that the story of SHG, the story of microfinance, has been a huge success story in this part of the world. Primarily Bangladesh, but also this part of India. The Eastern India, there's been it's a very big success story, and also some other parts of India, of course, but primarily Eastern India is a huge beneficiary of this whole thing. Okay, now here I don't want to comment. This was very, very nicely portrayed. Okay, and you could understand very much how you need microfinance to reach out to the poorest of the poor. Here, I'd like to draw your attention to this line. Any social organization, whether it is an NGO, CPO, voluntary organization, all those things which we discussed in one of our earlier classes, or even a PLC or whatever. If it is a social organization, it is bound to have the centrality of the social mission. You see, here money is sought to be made not for the sake of making more money, but to serve the social goal. It's a completely different way of looking at it. And therefore, in its operation, all social organizations are bound to have both revenue generating and non-revenue generating units. This is a characteristic which you cannot run away from, and in fact the revenue generation is a way, is a suggested means, at least in a course like this, in order to support the non-revenue generating units. Do you remember our discussions on project financing, project cycles, the difficulties of finances? Do you remember that? That's a connect you need to make, because I have said it in a previous class. One of the biggest challenges of any social organization is how does it, organize money. And we said the primordial formula was simple charity, but simple charity works in very, very, rare cases. Probably in a case like Mother Teresa's, missionaries of charity, it will work. It will work in a Roman Catholic church. It might work for a few temples, but it might work for football clubs. But it might not necessarily work for all social organizations. So what people, all NGOs, after charity, what was the second step? It was taking, grants from government. Then it was realized that government itself had very limited money to give out. So there is first of all individual grants, there is government grants, there is corporate companies giving out grants, but at the end of the day, these also are not that many, and increasingly, people are holding social organizations responsible for this. They want this money, if they put in $5, to be leveraged in such a way that it becomes $25 in practice. So they are demanding a kind of market efficiency which NGOs formerly didn't have. Which means they want NGOs to be run with the efficiency, professionalism and outlook of a business enterprise. This is something we need to understand. And the problem is that most of these grants that come, or most of the capital flows that come, usually are for a very limited period. Very rarely do you get money or capital flows beyond the duration of 1 year. In reality, what happens is, and I've said this before, when you are addressing the beneficiary is forming a long-term bond with you. The poor guy or whoever you are working with. You can't tell him after 12 months, guys, my money has run out, I'm off. Now wait till the next guy comes with some more money. It doesn't happen. Because, for that continuity of this, because what happens is, if you do work, they say, okay, we'll renew the grant in some cases. But in our financial year, it finishes in March. By the time you make your fresh project proposal, you submit it, it gets approval. Sometimes there are monitoring agencies or mother NGOs which monitor it. Then they submit it to the people giving the grant. Sometimes that is tied to some foreign aid organization which is giving the money. And in the whole process, at least 6 months to a year more are gone. So how do you manage? The only way you can manage is by creating your own internal revenue generating streams. So what I'm trying to suggest to you is Annapurna Mahila Mandal or Annapurna Parivar shows us the way which every NGO needs to really follow. That means without an internal revenue generating stream, it becomes very difficult for any NGO or any social organization to do meaningful work in the long run. Okay? So this is an important characteristic, and this has to be sustained. Plus, there are also certain other things which we say non-revenue generating, in the sense of education, bringing up children, giving them food and clothing. These are not necessarily directly revenue generating, but you have to do it. When you care for people, you can't say that you come work, take money and go. You have to organize their shelter, you have to organize their food, you have to organize their children's education, you have to organize their medical bills, you have to take them to doctors when they are ill, you have to organize hospitalization, and these don't necessarily mean money coming into the kitty. Because it is a social cause you are serving. So this is very important. So what I come to is that first of all, in terms of strategy, this is very important, that as a strategy, most NGOs, if they can, need to organize internal revenue generating streams. Having said that, no NGO should create the internal revenue generating stream in such a way that it conflicts with their mission. You understand? I know of many NGOs that kind of go and put in applications for grants wherever government or a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or a Clinton Foundation or a DFID or let's say Swedish grants or Canadian grants are giving money. So there's money available, you go make an application, take the money and do something. When the money runs out, you go somewhere else where money is available and grant and they do it. Ultimately, as an NGO, you don't create an impression. You don't create any profile, you don't create anything. After some time you're finished. So once you do it, you can create your revenue generation or your way of working in such a way that it does not conflict with the mission. You cannot do things that are disparate just because there is money that is available in those things. There's a huge temptation and some people fall for it, but that should not be done. Alright? So this is one part that I would like to talk about when talking about a social organization or an NGO strategy. When I come to the legal structure, because that is what you have then recommended if we go a little further, organizational structure, that is of course AMM, but if you talk of the legal structure, what are the several options? First of all, in a country like India or for any other place today, the legal structure becomes very important because you need transparency in terms of reporting money and in terms of getting money. If you do not have audited financial statements, it would be very difficult for any organization to access more funds. This is very important, and in fact, therefore, the compliances of these organizations are more under the scanner than corporate organizations. You must understand that. The government of India is a government, probably like many other governments, which are deeply suspicious of intentions of NGOs. In fact, if I may add, even in Bangladesh, Muhammad Yunus hasn't been on the best of terms with most governments in Bangladesh. So therefore, because this creates a parallel power structure, and there are many other things, and the fact is that many politicians use this as a kind of place to put in their black money. Many business enterprises use these mechanisms of social or NGO organizations to siphon off money. So therefore, government is deeply suspicious of any social organization, and therefore legal structures and compliance in reporting is very important. That means, and lastly, if you want to apply for a grant, to have credibility, you need a number of years of clean statements, good audit reports, people who audit you, the organizations, the donor organizations to give you a clean sheet. This is very important. Okay, so what are the legal structures that are conceivable? In India, the structures are as follows. First of all, it could simply be a trust. Okay? Temples, for instance, are run on trust, by trusts. They're not just temples. Wherever you want that the mission flows very clearly, and let's say it's not like a football club or a place which is a number of adherents, a trust is a good formulation because a trust can be there with even 3 people. So if it's 3 people, as long as those 3 people are there and they can co-opt somebody when somebody dies, so that ensures that you can hold the mission and uphold the mission in the long term. The next formulation is that of a registered society. A registered society ideally is that football club model. You have hundreds of thousands of members, and every year you have a voting to elect a new executive body, and that body then decides a priority for that year. So both these are accepted formulations in India of NGO management. So either registered society or trusts, and a lot of these societies get income tax exemptions under different laws by the government of India. One popular section is called Section 80G. The organization gets exemption under Section 12A, and in rare cases where these are organizations of national importance or they are doing significant research, there is a section called Section 35C, which allows you income tax exemptions under those categories. Section 80G is very restrictive. It doesn't give you a lot of leverage. Section 35C is a very good one, or Section 35 of the Income Tax Act, because in fact you can almost deduct that from your income and say that this has gone to charity. So therefore, if you're giving for a cause of research, the government gives it to you as a huge, recognizes your efforts in a big way. So that is then the second possibility. The third possibility, which is now operating, which is for the past, I think, 2 decades, is what is called a Section 25 company. That means this is a company which is set up not necessarily with the aim of making money. It has the same objectives as that of a social organization. So it is built on a premise that it is not for making profits, but the structure is that of a company. So as you move from an NGO to a social enterprise, this is one structure that can be examined and studied. So therefore, the Section 25 company also has a number of advantages. Section 25 companies, for instance, can have directors. It can operate in the market. It can probably do more with mutual funds or investing in shares, which trusts and let's say registered societies are more restricted because they are forced to be in a situation where banks become the primary source of investing money. This is an important consideration because when you sustain for a long time with your interest rates going down in banks, obviously, like individuals, organizations also need to resort to the market. That leverage is higher if you are registered as a company, all right, and not as a trust or registered society. So, and of course, there are the suggestions you've made of private limited company, but once you become a private limited company, you lose your social recognition. That's one thing I'd like to tell you. We've suggested a private limited company, but for society to recognize you, and for people to respect you as an organization that has those noble motives, it is worthwhile sticking to just these 3 legal models. All right? So then, of course, there are other things we've talked about, and I really don't have much of a comment. But I have something to say, and these are very good. So therefore, that we have technology and etc., all these kinds of things. So all good suggestions that were made. But now what I'd like to talk about is the story of moving from Dattapura's generation to, the daughter's name is Samant, isn't it? Samantpura. So that change. What happened was the father died, I think in sequence, then the mother died, and then the daughter took over. Am I right? Now look at what happened here. First of all, what I want to tell you is that it's, as we have discovered in some, in passing in several past presentations, that succession management is also a huge challenge in any social organization.